Sarah and her dad, Don, take Marie to the hospital quickly. Marie is struggling to breathe as she sits in the back of the car and is held by Sarah. Marie stops breathing, and Sarah tells her father right away to drive faster. When they get to the hospital, Don carries Marie and tells Sarah not to say anything to anyone before they go inside. 20 years ago, during a family dinner, the doctors and nurses take Maria away while Sarah and Don are left waiting in the hallway. Sarah Cody tells her father that she will be late to a party. This surprises Donna because he didn't know Sarah was going to a party, so he asks his wife, Irene, what's going on. Irene says she was going to tell him, but she didn't. Sarah tells him it's not a big deal because it's just a party, but her dad doesn't agree. Her attitude is that this is a big deal. He grabs Sarah's hand and forces her to sit while she turns to her mother, saying that she had already let her do it weeks before. Irene, Sarah's sister, could only say sorry and tell Sarah to listen to her father. Don tells her not to go to the party, even though Amy offers to take her. He tells his daughter she can't go to the party, and then he tells her she has to stay in her room. Sarah sneaks out of the house after everyone is asleep to meet her boyfriend. Chris is waiting outside for her, and the two of them ride off on Chris's motorcycle. Irene knocks on Sarah's door when she gets home and asks to talk to her. Don gets angry when Irene keeps knocking and starts banging on the door to get her to open it. Irene tries to convince him that Sarah probably just wants some alone time, but he doesn't listen and opens the door. Anyway, Sarah's bed is empty, and the window is open. Disappointed, before leaving, Don says Sarah is a problem. At the outdoor party, Sarah and Chris are having a good time dancing. Don is angry at home and keeps looking out the window to see if Sarah has come back. Then, Chris takes Sarah away from the crowd and sits her down on the grass in a quieter place. Chris sings a song to his girlfriend before he finally tells her he loves her. She tells him she loves him back. The next morning, Sarah goes home. While Don waits for her on the porch, he sees Sarah kiss Chris before they say goodbye. Then he watches his daughter walk to the house, but not toward. Don calls her attention, telling her to come in the front door like a normal person, adding that she can't make up her own rules, ignoring her father. Sarah tries to walk past him, but Don stops her, saying that they're not done yet. Don asks her if Chris is her boyfriend, but Sarah curtly tells him it's none of his business. When Don asks her if she's allowed to date motorcycle boys, Sarah gets mad and tells her dad that she'll leave their house when she turns 18 and they won't see her again. Feeling disrespected, Don gently pushes Sarah against the door to remind her that she has to follow his rules when she's in his house. Sarah tells her father to get off her and just in time. Her mother comes down from the stairs to ask them what's going on. Sarah gets away from her father and tells Irene that her father is crazy as she goes upstairs past her mother. Amy tells Sarah that she sneaked out and hopes it was worth it while they are in bed. Sarah says the addition was that Chris told her he loved her. They laugh like little girls, and Amy tells her that she won't be staying at their house for long. She just needs to keep her head down, stay calm, and say hush. Sarah says that someone needs to tell Don to back off. She calls him crazy and says that her mother just lets him walk all over her. Despite what Sarah just said, Amy tells her that she shouldn't mess with him. Then Sarah's mom walks into her room to tell her that she has to stay in her room for a week. Sarah swears again that she'll leave as soon as she turns 18 because she's angry. While they talk, her father stands outside her door and listens to them. When asked if she has a plan, Sarah says she wants to travel the world and start by getting jobs in Florida that will help her make her way across the country. Her mother helps her, but she also tells Sarah, who is upset about what she just heard, not to be careless. Don goes downstairs and sits down in the basement to think. Then he walks up to the bookshelf and starts pushing it, which opens a door to a secret room. After Sarah has graduated 3 months later, she calls Chris to talk about her. She tells Irv that her father is out front when he asks where he is. Her mother says it's good for him and that she's worried he's been in the basement too much lately. Irene then leaves, and Don tells Sarah to hang up the phone and help him with something when he is sure his wife is gone. Sarah says she's sorry to Chris, hangs up, and then helps her dad carry a big box down to the basement. When Don moves the bookshelf, Sarah is surprised to find a hidden room. She asks him what kind of room that is. Don says that the bomb shelter was built by the previous owner, and he made some changes to it later. Don asks his daughter what she thinks of the box after he brings it into the bomb shelter. She says it's not nice because there are no windows, and Don just tells her that's too bad before locking her inside. Sarah screams and bangs on the door to beg her father to let her out, but Don doesn't listen and runs away. Sarah looks around the room, which is just a shower head with a sink in it. Sarah pulls the box open. They carried it, and inside they found her clothes and other things. She tries to call for help again, but her father pushes the bookshelf back into place, covering the secret door. After Sarah failed 3 times to guess the door's security code, the lights went out and she had to use a flashlight. She looks around inside her box for anything that might help her, and she finds the vent. Sarah runs up to it and screams for her mother, but Don is already on the other side of the vent. He puts something over it so that no one can hear her. Don is finally happy, so he goes back upstairs as night falls. Since Sarah isn't home, Irene starts to worry. Amy says that Sarah is probably just at her friend's house, but Irene is still worried and says she'll call the police. Don tells her that Sarah will probably be home the next morning, but as she leaves the room, his wife is determined to call the police. Irene tells Amy to call Chris, and Don sits there acting like he doesn't know anything. Sarah stays in the bomb shelter for days because she has nothing else to do. She either paces around the room or tries to open the door until the lights go out. On the fourth day, her father finally decides to come see her, so Sarah hides behind. As soon as he walks in, she pushes him out of the way and gets out of the door, only to be stuck outside the second door. She screams for her mom, but her dad tells her that no one will hear her, no matter how loud she screams. Don then pulls Sarah back inside the bomb shelter by her hair. She is sure he can't do this to her, adding that she can't breathe because there's no air. Don says that there will always be air as long as there is power. If you try to use the keypad 3 times and fail, the power and ventilation will be turned off. When he says that he changes the code every day, Sarah moves away from him and asks why he is doing this to her. Don only tells her that this is what she gets for being rude and that she deserves everything she gets. He asks her if she understands him, and when Sarah doesn't answer, he hits her and pins her to the door before forcing himself on her outside the door. Don waits for his daughter to slowly get up off the floor before he throws up. He says goodbye. Irene talks to a police officer and tells him that her daughter would never just take off. The police officer says that Sarah can come and go as she pleases now that she is 18. He then asks Sarah's parents if she might be staying at a friend's house. Irene tearfully tells him that Sarah doesn't have many friends. When the officer asks if she has a boyfriend, Amy says that Chris hasn't seen Sarah either. The officer then asks who Chris is. Amy leaves the room to get his number when the officer asks for it. Don tells the officer that Sarah's bag and some of her clothes are missing after being asked a few more questions. He also asks Irene if she tells the officer about Sarah's plan. Sobbing, Irene tells the officer that her daughter wants to start her trip in Florida. Irene says that Sarah wouldn't leave without saying goodbye and that she hasn't even had her birthday yet. The officer then tells them that they've already filed a report for a missing person, but that's all he can do since they have no leads. At that point, Sarah is in the bomb shelter and is getting more and more upset as the days go by. Don was mowing the lawn, and Sarah could only think about her boyfriend and how they wanted to go to Florida one day. Chris comes to their house looking for Sarah, saying that the police called him and that he needs to give her something. Don makes up a story about Sarah running away with a guy named. He says that Sarah and Steve have been friends since they were kids and that Sarah has always talked about leaving with Steve when she graduates. Don says that his wife told him that he and Sarah are in Florida and working as waitresses. Upset, on her 21st day in captivity, Chris gets ready to leave, and as he does, Don acts like he feels sorry for him. On Sarah's 18th birthday, Don gives her a small cake and a chair that folds up, Sarah a red dress and tells her to put it on. Don tells her to pick something she wants to do when she's done. When she says she wants to leave, he tells her it's too early. When she asks for a TV, he tells her she needs to work for it. So Sarah asks for an alarm clock instead, and he agrees. He then tells Sarah to come close to him, and when she calls him Dad, he tells her to call him Don. Sarah walks toward her dad, and then she goes and gets a clock. On the 38th day, she gets some canned food, which gives her the idea to use the small tin can as a weapon. When her father comes home, Sarah is already wearing her red dress and holding a weapon she made herself. She tries to attack her father behind her mother's back, but Don is too quick and takes away her weapons. With these, he throws Sarah against the wall, and as she hits the floor, Don brutally steps on her arm. Under the pretense of teaching Sarah, the sick and evil man forces himself on her again. A year has gone by and Don gets Sarah pregnant as she cleans. Sarah's water breaks suddenly one day, and with the help of the book she has about being pregnant, she gives birth to her first child by herself. She calls her child Marie, and when Don learns that Sarah has already given birth, he tells her that motherhood will provide her with a sense of purpose. Marie lives in the basement with Sarah, and after 4 years of being held captive, Sarah gets pregnant again. Worried about getting pregnant again, Sarah tries to ask Don if they can finally go, but all he does is get mad at her. Don leaves and joins Irene and Amy upstairs for dinner. Amy tells her dad how proud she is of him for getting a promotion. When Irene asks Don if they can hire a private investigator now that he's getting a raise, he says no. Don says that Irene has already spent $5,000 trying to find Sarah in Florida, so they won't waste any more money. Irene says that she will never give up looking for her daughter, no matter how much it costs. Don is upset because they already have a daughter. Don gives Sarah and Maria a TV for Christmas in her 7th year in captivity, when Sarah has already given birth to their second child and is pointing to Amy. Sarah told Don to bring Marie some medicine, but Don gives her the kind for adults, which makes her sad. She tells Dawn that they are the wrong kind and that her daughter unbothered could get sick from them. Dawn tells her that she and her sister Amy were always sick, but that their mother never got sick. He also says that she needs to take care of it now that she is the mother. Sarah says that Marie needs to see a doctor, but Dawn ignores her and goes to put Marie to sleep. Sarah tells her a story and sings the song Chris wrote for her. Chris goes to Sarah's house one day in hopes of hearing from her. He runs into Amy, who is spending the weekend with her parents, and asks if there's any news about Sarah. Chris brings up Steve when she says they still haven't heard from her. This confuses Amy. Chris tells her that her dad told him about Steve and Sarah, which makes her even more confused because she doesn't know when the two men have talked. She's expecting her third child. Sarah tells Marie she shouldn't sing. Marie tells her she wants to go outside with Dawn. When Sarah tells her she can, Marie really talks back to her, so Sarah puts her in timeout. In the meantime, Chris finds out from Amy that Dawn lied about Steve, and Sarah, realizing it's all a lie. When he asks Amy what she thinks really happened to Sarah, she says she imagines her sister living happily somewhere. But she also says that sometimes she thinks her father has done something to her. Amy says that her father hit her mother once, and Irene had to stay in the hospital for 2 days because of it. When Irene finds out that Dawn lied to Chris, she asks her husband why he did it. He tells her in an arrogant way that it doesn't matter if he lies to a lowlife like him who has been sneaking around with Sarah, who can't keep herself under control. Amy asks him if he did something to Sarah, but Dawn says that all he's ever done is provide. At this point, Irene has had enough, so she tells her husband she's going to hire a private investigator and doesn't care what he says. Irene leaves in a rage, and when Dawn goes after her, Amy sees the keys he put down on the couch. She takes them and goes down to the basement, where her sister is giving birth just behind a bookcase in the bomb shelter. Dawn comes home while Amy is searching the basement. He asks for his keys back and sends her away in a huff. Sarah gives birth for the third time. And when Donna comes and asks what they're calling the baby, Sarah says they're calling him Thomas. Sarah gives Dawn a massage. And while she is doing it, she tells him that he should take Thomas upstairs because there isn't enough room for the three of them downstairs. She tries sweet-talking her father, telling him that if Thomas stays with him up there, she'll have more time to take care of Dawn. Dawn leaves Thomas on their porch with a note from Sarah saying that she hopes Irene will take care of her son Thomas. Irene picks up the baby as Dawn reads the note. She doesn't notice that the bassinet has a lower note. She calls Dawn, who acts like he doesn't know anything, and tells her that Sarah is the baby's mother while Irene brings Thomas inside. When Dawn finds the note, he goes down to the basement and tells Sarah that he has found her message to her mother that she is being held prisoner. In the basement, Dawn throws the small piece of paper in her face and tells her she still hasn't learned anything, so she should wear her red dress. Sarah is pregnant again after living in the basement for 14 years. One day, Marie decides to wear makeup. When Sarah sees how Dawn is looking at her daughter, she tells him to stay away from her to get back at her. As Dawn leaves, he turns off the power, so there is no ventilation system. Marie has trouble taking in air, so they must stay close to the vent. Feeling sad, Marie tells Sarah that she doesn't have any friends and is worried that she might not meet anyone, even not a nice boy. Sarah tells Marie that she's doing what she can to make it happen. Marie asks Sarah out of the blue how she met her dad. Then Sarah tells Marie that she has known Marie's father for almost her whole life. Marie tells Sarah to get a divorce as soon as they leave the basement. Sarah gets pregnant again in their house when she has been a slave for 17 years. Irene tells Thomas that she misses him a lot. Irene tells Thomas that his mother is wonderful in the bomb shelter when he asks about Sarah. Sarah uses the rainwater coming through the ceiling to try to dig through the ceiling with a spoon. She can dig a hole that goes deep enough to get to a sewer. Then she shines a light through it, and a man walks by. Unfortunately, the man tells Dawn about the light, telling him that someone is sending a signal to someone. Angry, Dawn beats Sarah in the basement while Marie and Michael, her youngest son, watch. When Dawn leaves, Sarah starts to bleed and gives birth. The baby was sad. On the 18th year, Marie and Michael get tired of waiting for Dawn to take the body and bury it, so they tell Dawn they want to leave. Dawn, on the other hand, says that it depends on whether or not their mother learns to behave. When Dawn leaves, Marie and Michael take out their anger on their mother, saying that she is the reason they are still stuck there. Sarah tries to convince them that she's just trying to keep them safe, but they keep screaming, still trying to get out. Then Sarah loses it, and while her kids watch, she starts breaking their things. The woman breaks down and lies on the floor. All she has left are memories of happier times with Chris and the life her own father stole from her. Her children feel bad about this, so Michael and Marie clean up the mess she made and apologize to her in a low voice. Sarah talks about Amy, and when the kids ask who Amy is, she admits that she hasn't been completely honest with them. She starts telling them her story by saying that she and her sister Amy used to live upstairs. Sarah says she had a mother and a father, but they were hard to get along with. She keeps telling how Dawn tricked her into going down to the basement and then locked her down there. As Marie and Michael learn more about who Dawn really is, Marie's asthma starts to get worse. Michael asks Sarah what's wrong with them, while Maria is having an episode. She is sure that there is nothing wrong with them and that Dawn has always been at fault. In the year 2019, Dawn goes to the basement with few supplies for Sarah and her kids. Sarah protests that they are already rationing their supplies, but Dawn only insults her, making Michael angry. He yells at Dawn and tells him not to talk to his mother that way, but Dawn teases his son and makes fun of him by saying that he can't do anything without thinking. He goes after Dawn, but the boy doesn't do much to hurt him. Dawn turns off the power and leaves when Sarah is finally able to get a hold of him, but Cody's lives go on. Dawn loses his job, and he and Irene start to fight a lot about money after that. Sarah does her best to make her children happy in the small basement, which is all they've ever known, while she tries to find a way for them to get help. One night, Dawn attaches a tube to the exhaust vent of her car, which leads to He shuts the garage door and starts his car, sending all the smoke straight to the basement. Dawn is sitting in his car when Thomas walks up and tells him to turn off the engine. He then goes to the basement to see if Sarah and her children are still alive. He is relieved to find that they are, even though they have been held captive for 20 years. Sarah's daughter has a bad asthma attack that makes it hard for her to breathe. Sarah begs Dawn to take them to the hospital when he finally shows up. Dawn at first says no, but Sarah finally gets him to agree. They send Michael to the hospital and leave him in the basement. Sarah and Dawn hear from the doctor that Marie is in very bad shape. While Marie's doctor tells Dawn about Marie's past health problems, Sarah doesn't say anything and just looks at the time the whole time. Sarah spills water on Marie's medical paper while Dawn isn't looking. This makes Dawn leave to get another one. Sarah jumps at the chance to ask the doctor for help. When Marie wakes up, Sarah tells her that they're finally free at home, which leads to Dawn's arrest. Michael can be saved from the basement by the police. The three siblings are finally back together, and Sarah, Amy, and Irene were watching from the porch when Chris walked in. Sarah and Chris find each other, and as they talk, Chris apologizes to her for believing Dawn's story and not looking. Sarah, on the other hand, tells him that she hasn't stopped thinking about him in the past 20 years. Chris gives Sarah a new helmet, which he was supposed to give her the day he talked to Dawn. After 20 long years, they finally get a ride together.